This is John for Global Women's Sports Radio. Today I'm on the beat. I have the pleasure of talking to Nancy Hogshead-Makar. How are you?
I'm good, John. How are you?
I'm good. Let me give you a proper introduction, though. You're a multi-time Olympic medalist. You're a lawyer. You're a scholar. You're an activist. You do a lot of great things for the women's movement, and that's basically why I wanted to talk to you today and to get a lot more information. So
Excellent.
welcome to it.
Oh, thank you. This is a great audience. These are my peeps.
We think so. We think you're a perfect match, which is why we wanted to talk to you. We think you've got a lot of stuff that will be of interest to our viewers, and I know it's a lot of interest to me as well. Before I ask you a bunch of questions, I've got a few here. I thought maybe if you could start off by talking about championwomen.org and then fill us in a little bit about that, and then I'll ask questions afterward.
Sure. Champion Women, we provide the legal advocacy for girls and women in sports. So we do a lot of the white papers, we do a lot of amicus briefs, we do a lot of making sure that people who don't know about sort of what processes are, like to help them learn what those are. And so our major issues are Title IX compliance or ending sex discrimination in athletic departments. That's equal opportunity, scholarships, and treatment. LGBT discrimination, employment discrimination, and sexual harassment and abuse is a very big one of ours.
Now as I said, you're a world-class swimmer. You won multiple medals. I think you won 3 gold and a silver, if I'm not mistaken, and almost won the 4, almost won the 5th. I know that. How did you get into taking up the cause?
Well, I grew up in the 70s as an elite athlete, and I was very conscious that what I was doing was not gender normal. And so I kind of got into it that way of being pretty young. And my coach would try to motivate the guys by saying, "Are you going to let a girl beat you?" And recognizing like that wasn't doing me any favors, but it certainly wasn't doing the guys any favors either. I pulled my coach aside and said, "Look, you're making both of our lives miserable. It just can't be that we're not teammates, and you're going to they're going to lose their masculinity if I beat them," which was regular. So unfortunately he did listen, and he never did it again. And that was kind of an entree. I went on to have as all women do, have experiences of sexism. I was out running. I was raped when I was in college. I was a sophomore in college, and this guy grabbed me and pulled me into the woods. And I would have thought that my accomplishment and I was already a 1980 Olympian. I was a very good student. I come from a phenomenally nice family. And I thought all that would have protected me from ever being raped. And I had this idea. I remember I was only 19, so, I have a little empathy for how dumb I was at the time. But I thought that, kind of if I lived my life right, that nothing like that could ever happen. And so when I recognized that it wasn't going to get better for me until it was better for all women, that was one of the major impetuses of making sure that I always knew I wanted to do something with women, but sport is where I thought I could make the biggest difference.
But you were a fairly young woman at the time. How did you find the courage? How did you, I'm sure a lot of women or people feel strongly about various things, but don't have the courage or the sense maybe to go out and do something. How did you pull it out of yourself?
For me, I did what I almost felt like I had to do, right? I almost felt like this was what I was supposed, I had this very strong sense of this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Donna DeVerona came and talked to the entire Olympic team about how Title IX was in jeopardy. At the time, there was a bad United States Supreme Court decision that required Congress to overturn it. It was called Grove City. So she said, we've got to educate Congress about how important the statute is. And I owed my college scholarship, but for this one statute, it wasn't going to happen. I was not going to get a college scholarship. There was not going to be a team for me. If I was just 2 years older than I am, I would not have would not have had the same opportunities that I did. So I kind of hit the timing just right. So every time they put a microphone in front of my face, I could talk about timeline, and I could talk about how I had a full scholarship that kept me in the sport, that allowed me at age 22 to go win 3 gold medals in the Olympics. And it was, so I started off kind of small. I really didn't know, Frank, when I think now, like what I know now versus what I knew then. So then that in between, then I had to go back to college. In between my junior and senior year in college, I was an intern at the Women's Sports Foundation, and just, was off to the races from there. That was the primary driver. Most of the work I did for the foundation was for free. The vast majority of working on the board, and I was vice president, and I was president, and I was on the board of stewards, and I was their legal director of advocacy. Most of, except for the last 4 years, was for free.
Now, you're very outspoken on a lot of topics, relating topics. I know one of the that you've recently posted on was the high testosterone levels.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the IOC and World Athletics has a rule about women who have, I don't like it when people just they just say it has to do with women with high testosterone, because that doesn't fully capture what's going on. So there is a differences of sex development, a DSD, and one of them, or several of them, involve people who are XY. So they identify as female. They grow up, they live their whole lives female, but their XY chromosome, which is the male phenotype, 2 is they have testosterone in the male range, which is light years away from the female range. And that testosterone is bioavailable, meaning they can use it the same way any male can use their testosterone. So all of sports discriminates. We discriminate with weight classes. We discriminate with countries. A lot of times the 3rd best athlete in the world comes from the country where the top 2 best people in the world come from that country. We discriminate with age groups. Doesn't matter how good of a gymnast you are. If you are not 16 years old, you don't get to be in the Olympics. We discriminate all over the place, and women is another place that we discriminate when we have boundaries around the category. So I'm Champion Women and myself are part of the Women's Sports Policy Working Group, and we have a whole set of policies on what we can do to make sure that sport isn't a place to discriminate against either transgender or people with DSDs. But we don't want that. But at the same time, we do have to draw boundaries around the girls and women's category, the same way that you draw a boundary around the 120 weight pound class.
So clarify for me then, if
Sure.
Like a transgender person, male to female, we've seen it. Somebody I believe recently did won a medal. Where do you stand on that?
So with both of those, what you're looking for is, number one, does somebody have the male sex-linked advantage? Okay, do they have I don't think people who are outside of sports really grasp these enormous differences between men and women. It's so big that across the world we sex segregate, right? We don't let men into the women's category. And so what we say is consistent with NCAA and IOC rules, the Women's Sports Policy Working Group, is if somebody can mitigate that sex-linked advantage, if somebody can roll that back, then they should be able to compete in the girls and women's category. There's something called being testosterone resistant, and that means that somebody has XY chromosomes, but they have testosterone in the male range, but it's not bioavailable. And so they look kind of like models. They have that long, skinny, lean look. They're typically taller because height is on the Y-axis, but there's no reason why they can't compete in the girls and women's category. That is you know, they don't have the Mac Daddy difference that happens is at male puberty. So if they don't have that, then there's no reason not to include. So it's wrong, I think, to just go on chromosomes, XX female, XY male. Not just that, they also need that the male puberty. So if they can roll it back, yay, into the women's category. If not, surely we can alter sport in a way that would include them. But again, we do have, there are reasons why we sex segregate, and we need to uphold those reasons why we do.
I have to say that's the best explanation, the clearest explanation I've heard, because it's, to me, it's a fascinating topic. I'm not really sure exactly where I stand on the issue, but to me that was a really clear, concise way to put it, and I appreciate coming from you especially.
Thanks, John.
I don't know if how much you follow the other sports, but in the NCAA basketball tournament recently, there was a big controversy over the differences that men got from women. The men got, you know, the top food, they got the best equipment, and the women got minimal, I guess is what it was. And you know, the thing is, I don't understand, like, somebody made that decision. That just didn't happen. It wasn't, oh, well, we found out this. How could, and they promised a big investigation, they're gonna look into it, and I've never heard anything since. How does that happen? Like, what? And more importantly, I guess, how do we make sure that never happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can never underestimate the power of sexism. Never underestimate. So the law firm that was hired to do this investigation, it has come out, and they found that the NCAA has been discriminating against women, not just in basketball, but throughout the entire endeavor. It has denied women's basketball the opportunity to make money for its institution, which means that the institution is not going to give it as much attention, and it has discriminated in numerous ways. Pretty much every way that you can measure discrimination, it has done. And so the issue is, can individuals sue the NCAA? I would argue yes. I sued the Florida High School Athletic Association because they were responsible for a decision that individual schools couldn't stop it, right? It was in a budget cutting move, they wanted to cut between 20 and 40% of all competitive schedules, but they wanted to exclude football. So 100% of women were going to get their schedules cut, and 30% of boys were not going to have their schedules cut. And so we won by every metric. So I think they could, but the problem is, who wants to do it? Who wants to bring the case? You know, kind of putting it together. You know, I would not be surprised, given this the report that came out from the law firm that the NCAA hired. I would not at all be surprised if Congress doesn't take it up and say that the NCAA has to stop discriminating against women.
No, in the basketball case, it's different. From my next point I'm going to make, the basketball case is different because they should be absolutely equal. It's 2 tournaments and all that.
Right.
Is it discriminatory though if a college spends more money on a higher revenue producing sport, like men's football versus, say, women's lacrosse?
Yeah. Okay. So tutorial 101. Usually take an hour for this one, but okay. Here's the deal. If a school receives federal funds, if it gets tax dollars, it has to agree not to discriminate based on sex. So is it a justification to say, well, this football program is bringing in more money? And the answer is no. Title IX, it says, again, it's a quid pro quo. We give you money, you agree not to discriminate. It was based on another statute called Title VI, which says you cannot discriminate based on race, color, national origin. So imagine a donor comes in and says, you know, I just want to have a building and it's just for white people. Black people cannot go to this building. Duh, they cannot do that. They have to, you can't allow a donor or another source of income to be an excuse or reason why there's discrimination. So it doesn't matter whether or not a school or a particular sport brings in money. It doesn't matter what a donor, it doesn't matter if a sponsor. A sponsor wants to give lots of money, say, to the boys' baseball team, doesn't want to give it to the softball team. Is that a reason to discriminate? Answer, no, none of those are reasons to discriminate. A school always has an obligation to treat men and women fairly. That said, there can be differences in how much money gets spent on individual sports. This is what makes it hard as an advocate, because sort of the devil's in the details. So a football uniform can be $2,000. A track and field uniform is $50. So,
Right.
so you're giving the students the same educational opportunity, even though the costs are very different. But you can see that schools have clearly exploited this. I mean, one of the things, John, that I wanted to say on this interview is if you go onto a website, you can either go onto championwomen.com, or we have one called Title IX Schools, TITLEIX schools.com. And we have taken the data that comes from the Equity and Athletics Disclosure Act, and we have taken that data and we've made it understandable for every athlete, for every parent, for every alumni, for them to see how they're treating men and women. So we have 3 metrics we grade them on. One is scholarship dollars. When you add it all up, schools are denying women $1 billion in college scholarship dollars every single year because they're women, no other reason, unexcusable. Number 2 is opportunities to participate. How many opportunities would a school need to give to women in order to be giving men and women equal opportunities? In total, it is 183,000 opportunities, which means that if every school discriminated equally, and they don't, it would be 3.5 new teams per school. 3.5 new teams. So we're Champion Women is we're very good at kind of getting people this, get up and go energy. And so when you see all these lawsuits that have been going on, when schools either drop a sport or they're not giving the women the same medical care attention, particularly in the era of COVID, we're getting these communities together that support the 18 to 22-year-old, because only the 18 to 22-year-olds with a lawyer can change that. So go onto the website, see how your school's doing. My guess, almost everybody that I talk to, they're almost always shocked at how badly their school is doing, right? There's the narrative that you tend to hear is, well, Title IX was passed 50 years ago, and now women are winning 60% of the Olympic medals. And that is true. We are doing well, but that does not mean that there's equality by any metric. None.
And another question I ask, I always, because I interview a lot of WNBA players, I interview a lot of professional women's softball players. So I wanted to get your opinion. With no disrespect to the male coaches out there, I always think that why aren't there more women coaches in those various sports? It's a women's league, and I'm not saying that because they should be women because it's a lesser league, not at all. But I think for the leagues to grow, for the leagues to be really serious, I think they need the women to come up as coaches, as general managers, as assistants, whatever, and not rely, or rely is probably a bad word, but not have all the men coaches. Am I off on that, or?
No, you're spot on, but you're only half inclusive, which is there's a reason why we sex segregate in sports. We were talking about that earlier about transgender athletes. There's this Mac Daddy huge difference that happens at male puberty, that if you want to give women an equal opportunity, they need to have their own team. But that does not apply to employment. And it doesn't apply not just to the WNBA or college women's sports, it applies to college men's sports as well. Less than 2% of all NCAA coaches are women. And most of them are in quote unquote co-ed sports like track and field or swimming or, some sport like that. And again, there is no reason why we sex segregate. That is a pure, unmitigated function of sexism. That is who gets to hire, who thinks that this is a good fit, who determines what the metrics are for who they're going to hire and who they're not going to hire, who gets encouraged, who is seen as having your leadership potential, and that the fact that women are not have so few opportunities in coaching is sexism 101.
Wow. Did you ever think of teaching? Because honestly,
I do teach, yeah.
You do teach somewhere. Where do you
Yeah,
teach?
I teach at Rutgers.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I missed that in my. I missed that in my. I did some research on you, and somehow I missed that. Because wow, you would be like, I couldn't imagine. I would be fascinated to have you as an instructor. I learned so much in 15 minutes talking to you, and in such a, I'm repeating myself, but it needs repeating, in such a clear, concise, easy way to understand things. Obviously, I write for Global Women's Sports Radio. I'm a big advocate of women. I'm a big supporter of women's sports. I think it's completely underrated, and I've seen the athletes, and I have so much respect for them. I so appreciate your time in talking to me and helping to clarify this, and hopefully clarify it for some of our viewers, because I think a lot of people are unclear on certain things. Some of the issues are a little cloudy, or they're not explained well, and you've cleared up perfectly that. Before I let you go, I know you've already said a couple of websites, but if you want to say them again in final last words, thoughts, encouragement, whatever you want.
Sure. Well, we always need allies, and we have a really great database of people who want to make a difference. We always need funds. I was just negotiating with the top person I work with is going to be going to law school. So how are we going to rearrange this? But so one is championwomen.org, and that's where you can sign up for all of our alerts and things like that. We really try to be value added. We try not to just be, hey, give us money for no reason, just do. Okay, and then two is title9schools.com. Please look up your school and see how it's doing. This year, we're actually getting all high schools included as well. We're only going to be able to do just the metric of how many opportunities that those high schools would need to add, but we are including them as well. So those are the two websites, and come on our team.
I'm joining your team. I really can't thank you enough for your time. It was a tremendous, enlightening experience. And it's a thrill to talk to you. I mean, you're a multi-time Olympic medalist of all. So that alone, plus all the work, the great work you've done for women's sports and society's advocacy, encouraging equality for all. So I greatly appreciate your time. And with that, I will let you get back to your day, and thank you very much.
Sure thing. Thank you, John. Take care. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.